Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan, Tower 2.
Today, we are going to be discussing and reviewing Wandavision, the Disney Plus show from Marvel Studios, which ties into the MCU and features the characters of Wanda Maximoff and the synthesoid Vision, who she fell in love with in Avengers Age of Ultron. This is going to be a straight through review. So if you have not seen the season in its entirety, then you want to back out now because there will be spoilers. We're just going to talk straight through about everything as far as the show is concerned. So you have been warned.
All right. So I'm coming at it from more of a general watching the show, taking it at face value, connecting it with the Marvel MCU. I did not read a lot of Avengers. I was aware of Scarlet Witch and Vision. I wasn't terribly focused on them. I was also aware that they had some pretty major storylines that cropped up after I had stopped avidly collecting. So John will be speaking more towards that sort of thing, but I'm just taking it as mostly a viewer who knows what we've been given up to this point and has some fond memories of occasionally experiencing Vision and the Scarlet Witch if they happen to cross paths with Spider-Man for the most part.
So I think we're going to go ahead and give our overall ratings for the show here before we do our deep dive into talking about what went on in the various episodes and in the final conclusion. So I will start off by saying that I really thoroughly enjoyed this series. I think that it took some huge leaps and some risk in originality and things of that nature with regards to not only the pacing, but the delivery with regards to how the shows were filmed. You have the first 3 episodes being like your sitcoms from 50s, 60s, and 70s. This is going to weigh into the rating that I have. So from episode 4 to its conclusion, I was so on board with this show. The first 3 episodes for me, I knew what they were doing, but I wasn't excited yet. And although I enjoyed the episodes, I didn't have that same pulse pounding excitement that an MCU show or an MCU film brings me. That nostalgia, that, oh my God, I'm seeing stuff that I wish had been a movie from 40 years ago. I didn't have that same feeling in these first 3 episodes. So that's one of the things that, is a part of my rating here. So what I'm giving WandaVision overall is a 4 tower rating. And it would have been more had I been excited exactly how I was starting with episode 4. But, that's not to say episodes 1 through 3 I thought were bad. I enjoyed them. I just hadn't gotten excited yet. And, that's what keeps this from getting a higher rating for me. What about you, RJ?
I'm also coming in at a 4. For different reasons. I didn't mind I thought the first 3 episodes were fine. I enjoyed the more deliberate pacing. I didn't think they were quite as clever as they thought they were, and I did feel they dragged a bit. I love the midsection, and I had quibbles with the end. So that is the reasons for my rating. We'll get into all those specifics, but I thought when we got to the middle and we found out exactly what this series is about, exactly what the character struggles were, and how they relate is oddly relatable to things that real people go through. And yeah, I mean, we're going to get into it, but those were, I think that's when this series really hit its stride and really made me care more about Vision and the Scarlet Witch than I ever thought I would. So there you go. I'm recommending, I guess, episodes 3 through 7. I have nothing against the first 3, and I have nothing against the last one. I just thought I just had certain expectations that didn't quite get met. But I mean, if I look at the entire run, it was all quite spectacular, and I highly recommend it.
With that, we'll dive into the I think we'll take the first 3 episodes kind of collectively,
Sure.
at least because they are more so the old sitcom trope that they're using here. And I don't think that they did bad with it. I think it actually worked. It just didn't get me excited. And I think that, it worked for me and other people, but a lot of folks were turned off by this because this is not what they were expecting from the MCU. And I think that that's why you had a lot of people scratching their heads with these first 3 episodes. So in the first episode, it's titled Filmed Before a Live Studio Audience, which most sitcoms in this era were. You had a newlywed couple of Wanda and Vision moving into the town of Westview in the 1950s. This was in black and white, as most sitcoms of that era were. Most TV of that era were in the 50s, black and white still. And despite Vision being an android and Wanda having telekinesis and reality warping abilities, they attempted to blend in with normal folks. And we see this play out as a sitcom. And Vision has a job, and Wanda is a homemaker. And then we have the nosy next door neighbor, Agnes, and they're planning to celebrate. And they end up not knowing what the date marked on the calendar was for. And it happens to be that they were having his boss over, and they were trying to fit in. They seemed as much clueless as the audience was with regards to kind of what's going on. And so during the dinner, there's some uncomfortable moments, and then Mr. Hart, Vision's boss, is choking on some food, and Vision uses his abilities to save him. And we notice at the end of that episode that that Mr. Hart's wife is kind of acting like she's asking for permission to do certain things. It's kind of really weird. And that's kind of, I think, what threw a lot of people off about these first 3 episodes. I took it in stride. I thought that some of the jokes were funny because it reminded me of like the Donna Reed show or the Father Knows Best shows of the 50s, and even the Dick Van Dyke show of the early 60s, which was originally filmed in black and white as well. So with that being the case, that first episode, I was excited to have it on. It was only like 30 minutes. And, I think that if they had made this a 40, like an hour and some change long premiere episode, they probably it would have been more endearing to fans. But they did what they do, and Marvel does that. The second episode, Don't Touch That Dial, set in the 60s. Very Dick Van Dyke show at this point esque. And, just like little comedic nuances that you would expect from a show set in the 60s. The technology wasn't like what we're used to, the morality wasn't the same. You had Wanda and Vision sleeping in separate beds, and then by the time that this episode ends, they're coming together with the beds pushed next to one another. I remember sitcoms where you didn't have two, husband and wife in the same bed. That, just wasn't something that was going to be shown on TV due to, the time and the morality of the time. So you had that kind of thing. It's still in black and white. But some things start to appear in color, and some of these things are kind of mysterious. And you're seeing now that they're starting to knock on the door of the reality in the outside world. And you start to see that something is going on. We're introduced to a black character named Geraldine. And she appears out of nowhere, and she tries to fit in. And you've got a character who's referred to as the devil. She's a very obnoxious woman who lives in the neighborhood, very snooty, and then you've got a talent show that is on the verge of disaster because Vision swallows some chewing gum and it gums up. Yeah, that's what they used to say back in the day, gums up the works, as it were, with regards to his internal processes. And although in today's world, if Vision from Age of Ultron had swallowed gum, it wouldn't have done that. But of course they were playing to this, him having gears inside of his body and the gum sticking and stuff, much like kind of what you see in a cartoon. Wanda has to use her magic to keep their secret of that they're just a normal couple. You see a little hints of Bewitched in this series.
Yeah. I was also thinking I Dream of Jeannie.
Right. There was a little bit of that too. Yeah.
Kind of that approach, you're not supposed to take it too seriously.
By the end of the series, Wanda is pregnant. And there's a strange guy in a beekeeper uniform coming through the sewers. And Wanda rewinds this like you were rewinding a videotape, as though it never happened. And then the setting is turned to color, much like the series, the sitcoms of the 70s, and then you start to have the fashion change. And that's how this episode ends at episode 2. So you can kind of see the progression here. There were some laughs. Haha. I mean, I caught it. It was cute. But, I was like, okay, when are we going to get to the good stuff? That was my feeling about this whole thing. And then we got episode 3, now in color. Episode 2 was titled Don't Touch That Dial. And then you can see the theme of the episode titles. And then episode 3 was now in color. It's set in the 70s. So now they introduce the family doctor, and he is telling Wanda she's 4 months pregnant, which, that was kind of a shot at how TV time is not in real time. So you have in TV shows where someone, they say that this person is pregnant, and then the next thing they're ready to have the baby because you have time that was taken off during the summer, between the seasons and so forth and so on. So that's kind of hinted at with this. And, little weird things. Their neighbor Herb is unknowingly cutting through a wall between the two properties, and Vision finds this kind of strange, and they're painting the nursery. And then before you know it, now Wanda's 6 months pregnant, and she begins to go through contractions, and then her abilities start to manifest about things going on in the house. Geraldine arrives to help Wanda deliver twin boys, Billy and Tommy. Vision catches Agnes and Herb gossiping outside. They talk about Geraldine and not knowing who she is or where she came from, and that she doesn't have any roots there in Westview. And meanwhile, Wanda is interrogating Geraldine after she reveals she knows that Ultron killed Wanda's twin brother, Pietro. And Wanda notices that Geraldine is wearing a pendant with the MCU organization's sword emblem. And when Vision returns, Geraldine is gone because Wanda has taken her out of the house, blown her through the wall, and she goes through the barrier that's on the that's keeping Westview enclosed. Now you see her go through that barrier. She's in 70s garb and she's laying there, and the sword agents converge, and she says, "It's all Wanda."
Mm-hmm.
So,
and also, what I loved is that the screen ratio changed to a more modern motion picture viewing. If you're watching at 16:9, everything was letterboxed in the 4:3, and then it blows out as soon as she comes through the other side. And I believe that's the first time that we see modern TV ratios, and then it starts switching back and forth from that point on, where anytime you're outside, it would change ratio, and then go back to TV mode. When they would go into town, which I thought was a terrific attention to detail that I appreciated.
Right, yeah, they did the aspect ratios differently, and that kind of of course, the grain of the film was different too. So when you had the older TV shows, it was clear, but it had it felt like it was being taped or recorded on old equipment, old types of cameras when they were doing those era pieces. And then when it went into present day, it looked very modern. And that was a way that they would distinguish between the two. So having went through these first 3 episodes as we have, since we grouped them together because they're the sitcom episodes before we start to see what's going on in the real world outside of the barrier. What was your overall feeling on this article?
Yeah, different impression from yours, but I did have a different quibble. And I knew from the trailer this was going to be something different. What I love is they were willing to try something that people weren't used to. When Marvel was bought by Disney, there was talk about, will they always play it safe? Will they still take risks? And I really kind of love the fact that what they did in the first 3 episodes was really annoying people. Where there were people on Facebook that just didn't know what to make of it, and they were confused, and what was all this, and yada yada yada. And I'm like, let's let them do what they're gonna do. Let it play. And I was fine with that. I knew we would eventually get there. I didn't know it was going to be episode 4, episode 5, episode 6. I knew eventually they were going to lay down their cards, and I was okay, just going along with the ride, and letting it do what it was going to do for as long as they felt that they could draw it out. But my goodness, some people were so upset, declaring it the worst thing ever, and what am I looking at, and what am I watching? And I'm like, I kind of love that about this. What I didn't like so much was simply the acting style. You could tell that our two main actors were not used to this kind of acting, and I say that as someone who's watched a lot of this kind of junky sitcom TV. It didn't always feel as authentic as what I think that. What they were going for something, and I just don't think they always got that. It never felt as involving as I think they wanted it to be. It didn't feel as authentically 50s or as authentically 60s. The acting always seemed to be a bit off, and I understood that. I think that's because these are modern actors. They've been in motion pictures. They don't necessarily know how to do screwball comedy. I mean, this is not Lucille Ball. She just isn't. And that's okay, but I never felt completely involved in the sitcom setup as much as I would have liked to have been. It always kind of felt a little fake to me. And I'm not talking about the weird parts. I just mean when they were just trying to channel that. I don't think it quite came through, which is why I give the second third of this more credit when they moved a little bit closer to what to their element and what they're used to. But we're going to get there. But that was, I love the homage. I love the send up. I was like, I'm gonna let it play out for as long as it needs to play out, and they'll eventually tell me. We'll eventually get there. And I was happy to let them try this great experiment, because I love it whenever anything tries to take a chance. And I was just delighted that they were doing something that put some people off and they weren't sure what to make of it. So yeah, that was where I was up to this point. Wasn't my favorite thing ever, but I was certainly willing to give them a little room to do what they were going to do. And it delivered. Spoiler, it was worth the wait.
Yeah, I have to say that I agree with regards to the authenticity for the 50s and 60s or whatnot. It was a little bit better as we got further into the timeline.
Yeah.
The 50s and 60s, I kind of think that they weren't as comfortable with it because
comedy's tough, John. Comedy is tough.
It is, and I think that a part of it had to do with and I could be wrong. This is entirely speculation, folks, but I think that it had to do with them trying to stay true to the buildup that they were trying to do. So they really couldn't get too involved, and I don't think that they wanted to give off the impression that every episode was going to be so tied to this trope of period sitcoms. I think that they were kind of wanting to also they were kind of rushing through this. As I said, these episodes were like 30 minutes, a little bit more. And it was just really, full of little Easter eggs and knickknacks. For instance, just to give you an example, in episode 1, all these episodes have commercials in them.
Yes.
And they had a commercial about a watch, and the watch was made by Strucker. So if you're familiar with the MCU and comics, you know that Baron Strucker, he was the one who Wanda and Pietro experimented on them with the Infinity Stone. So that's a callback to him, and it had the Hydra symbol on it, which von Strucker was a member of Hydra. And so these little Easter eggs like that set in 50s style commercials. You had one about a toaster, and it was an innovative toaster from Stark Industries, so that's your nod to Tony Stark. And you also had a lot of calls to the fact that in the 50s and 60s, you were dealing with the space age, and you were dealing with technological gadgets actually starting to be introduced to home life. And the commercials talked about that. And a lot of that had to do with home life. So, you had the vacuum cleaners, you had the toasters, you had the blenders, you had the dishwashers, which was a new thing, during these eras and stuff. And usually only people who were well off or rich had those types of things in their houses. Yeah, at this point in reality, during those decades, not everyone had a TV yet, and especially not one that was color. So you had to take in consideration that this was there were a lot of technological innovations going on, and these commercials, I think, captured them pretty well. And if you were paying attention, or you actually knew that about these eras, that you kind of would catch on. I wouldn't imagine that this would have been something that a younger person may have caught on to, but there were those little subtleties that the producers put into these 3 episodes I thought was kind of interesting. It at least kept me watching. Let's put it that way.
And one notable one was Geraldine, a black woman in was it still the 50s in episode 2?
That was the 60s in episode 2.
60s, yeah. But she was self-aware of the fact that she would not be a character in a show like this at that point in time, and made a point of practically stating as much. I don't think it's spelled out, but people who are familiar with TV tropes and familiar with what was allowed then, that's exactly what she was speaking to, was the idea of, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. It was a commentary that on TV, that still was not generally allowed. And I got a chuckle out of that. I thought that was a good way to point that out.
Right. Yeah. And then also, but we had to look at the reality of the situation. Back in the 50s and 60s, you did not have a lot of integrated neighborhoods. So
True.
You had to think about the fact that TV, it mirrored real life situations, which is why you didn't see blacks in sitcoms a lot, during the 50s and 60s, unless they were like, out in a department store. You saw them. They weren't your neighbors.
Yeah,
that was
point well taken. Yeah.
Right. And that was not something that was shown until, really the late 60s and 70s, where you started to have, someone black appear in a sitcom. And then even then it was like one couple from down the street or over on the other block, and they only made guest appearances, unless, of course, it was a sitcom that centered on black characters. So very interesting little thing, and they played it true. I'm glad they did that, though, because it shows the historical context of things. This concludes part 1 of the Two Towers Talk Show episode, where we discuss and review WandaVision. Join us on Wednesday for part 2. Until then, stay nerdy. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn, where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.